Hello, everyone. Yui here, back with another commentary, this time for Anthony Mann's Jimmy Stewart starring Western The Far Country. We are here with Jason, and we will be doing, uh, I don't know, yeah, our first, hopefully, of many Mann commentaries. I would like to do all those big Westerns if I can. You can listen to this as a podcast by itself, or you can sync it with your own copy of the film. We'll do a countdown, and you can press play when we say go. All right. Three, two, one, go. So, Jason, what's your relationship with Anthony Mann and Jimmy Stewart?
Uh, so Jimmy Stewart, I have known since I was a very small child. My dad always showed me classic Hollywood movies. He loved Jimmy Stewart. So, I saw a lot of his classics like It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I didn't get to this side of Jimmy Stewart until a little later. My first exposure to like dark Jimmy was Vertigo. When I was like 11 years old, I that was the first time I'd ever seen him like not play kind of like a nice all-American like everyman. And then Anthony Mann, I think I had heard of him for like a few years before I saw him. I think it was on the Criterion Channel when they had like a several, not like a few years ago. I think in like 2019, or this might have even been when it was just Filmstruck. But I think I saw Man of the West first, which I loved. And then I think when it came back on the channel, I saw a few more. I saw The Naked Spur and Bend of the River. And now I've seen all of his like major westerns. There's a few more I need to see of the lesser known ones. A couple of his big noirs. I've seen El Cid. So yeah, I've seen a good amount of Anthony Mann movies, and he's definitely a great director who I think is maybe a little bit less talked about these days among the younger crowd than he should be.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know if he's ever exactly been in fashion. You know, I know he was a cause celeb for the Kaye crew, but he was never really picked up in the way that some other directors were, right? Like, I think still today you have people who, will ride or die for, like Jacques Tourneur or Otto Preminger, right? Like, you have this. Like, is there an Anthony Mann cult? I don't know if there is, but I think he deserves one, certainly. At least for his westerns. But, he's also did noirs. He did epic films. I've seen most
Yeah,
of
I like
his.
those
I
a
think I've
lot.
seen all of his noirs except for like maybe one or two. Um, but I mean, he's just an excellent director. He's just astonishing. And yeah, it's. Do you feel like him having the same name, the same last name as Michael Mann? Do you think that's like done him a disservice in the history of cinema? Because nowadays you'll have people, talking about Michael Mann to death. People such as
Uh,
myself. And meanwhile,
Maybe.
they forget the first man, the man's man.
Well, it's funny that you mention him in connection because I think something which I think Anthony Mann does in some of his movies, which I think can be kind of similar to Michael Mann, is that he'll have like a protagonist and an antagonist where they have a lot of the same qualities and they have like kind of a similar attitude, but the protagonist will eventually see that the antagonist is like a more extreme version of him, and then the protagonist usually makes the decision to kind of like walk away from that, from what he could be and what he sees in the antagonist, which does kind of
Right.
remind me
There's
of
this figure of the
Michael.
double.
So I do think they have that quality in common, which is why I think maybe like you said, we should talk about Anthony Mann some more because he was doing that beforehand.
Yeah, this movie was written by Borden Chase, who
Yes.
basically wrote like several of the best westerns ever. He did Red River, Man Without a Star, John Sturges' Backlash, which I gotta see, Far Country, Winchester 73, Bend of the River, and Raoul, which is The World in His Arms, which is a super cool movie. So he's kind of like one of these like tough guy writers. He did Walsh's Under Pressure. Very good at depicting this idea of like, yeah, In fact, in almost all these movies that I'm talking about, there's these two contrasting masculine figures, and they mirror each other, and they end up coming to blows. You know, this is what Red River is all about, under pressure. It is quite interesting that, yeah, you almost have like a case of like screenwriter obsession, but he clearly was comfortable in these ed, like Western adventure fighting milieus. He did war films. He did films about jewel robberies and like war pictures and stuff. So he did three of these Anthony Mann, Jimmy Stewart collabs, and I think it's easy to see how Winchester 73, Benno River, and Far Country within that saga, they do feel very close to one another, especially in the episodic quality, where the movies don't necessarily have there's a stop and start quality to them. Like
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
several segments. Like in here, there's like a journey motif where you start here in this when they arrive, and you got the stuff with the riverboat, and then you get to the stuff in the town later, and then like they're adventuring out into the mountains, and so there's yeah, and you see that with Red River too, right? Obviously because of the cattle drive, and I like movies like that a lot, where we go from different places, and there's this sense that like each segment of the movie had its own little visual motifs and environmental details.
Yeah, I almost wonder whether maybe part of the reason why some I think more modern viewers are don't always like these ones as much is because of that. Like they're so used to like the extremely tight like Sid Field save the cat plot structure that it's like they almost forget like no, not all movies are like that. Like they can be kind of more loose and just more sort of more be a series of like incidents held together by like a common thread of like character.
Yeah, well, that's something about a lot of, I mean, just films in general, but especially old Hollywood movies, that there's not this ironclad structure that you think there is, that everything has to abide by. People were very much still experimenting, coloring outside the lines. There was no guidebook yet. And I think a film like this benefits from that a lot because, it's a cool Western in that it takes place in this like huge mountainous snowy country that not a whole lot of Westerns otherwise take place in. And
Yeah,
I think, is this Anthony Mann's first widescreen movie? I think it might be.
yeah, I
Uh,
think so.
yeah, and he makes great use of it, and he would later go on to make these superb scope movies. And it's interesting the jump from him from black and white to color. It's fascinating to me because his work with Alton and other cinematographers in black and white is so distinctive. It's very powerful, very, like these single sources of lighting that like coat everything in this magnificent glow and these huge silhouettes and shadows, and it's just gorgeous stuff. And by and large, like I am obsessed with that sort of thing, and I love it. But when he starts making these westerns, you see him kind of experimenting because Winchester 73, that's in black and white, not in widescreen or anything, and it very much has this like dry, acidic, like deep focus, very very painterly look to it.
Yeah,
And whereas this movie, there's a lot more. It's like rugged. There's more mud. It's
a lot of
it's
earth
less
tone.
precise. Yeah, earth tones. Yeah, so it's interesting that uh, despite all these westerns sort of being of a piece in the same way that the Bud Bedecker, like the movies that he did with the Renown cycle, those are all of a piece too. And I think Bedecker and Anthony Mann are sort of in conversation with each other to a
Yeah,
large degree. Uh, they feel similar in some ways, but then again, like, very different in others. I think the key thing about Anthony Mann that distinguishes him, regardless of the style that he's trying to work with, is this idea of not not only not running away from the violence of the settings that he depicts, but very much rooting it in a person's internal sense of self, in psychology, and how
mm,
that's expressed through action. You know, like these, what these and Bud Bedecker share is it's like an existential Western. It's a Western that the environment ends up forcing people to make these choices, and it changes their character fundamentally, right? Like these are
Yeah.
westerns where a sense of self is a fluid thing, and it can be subject to denigration or a loss of self-worth or shame or heroism. But either way, the characters in here they're forced to become something that they're not, and it gives these movies a sense of dynamism and power that I quite adore. To compare that to the Bud Bedecker thing, I think in his movies, it's often more about how the environment leads to this like sense of abstraction in what a
Mm.
person is, and like their characters are more solid, like it's almost archetypal. Whereas I don't
Yeah.
think Anthony Mann deals with archetypes. His stuff is very rooted in a firm material situation. I wouldn't
Yeah.
describe him as like a realist necessarily, but he's he's almost like yeah, like more materialistic, more there's this idea that like in these movies like Men of the River, Winchester 7030, this one, the economics of the West come to the
Yes.
fore in a huge way. It's very present, and
Yes.
I like that a lot. I like that he's very much concerned with like how people survive, how they make money. There's not this idea of like the loner bounty hunter that exists in the Bud Bedecker films. There's more of this idea of you have these isolated, damaged men who are forced to interact with communities and try to find their place in a world that they don't necessarily belong in. And how do you make money? How do you, where do you sleep for the night? Who's employing you, right? These are questions in an Anthony Mann film, which are very important.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think this movie is all about competing forms of like social organization because you have like Jimmy Stewart, who is this like sort of gun for hire. I'll do any job that I can. He's trying to be a seller, and then later on in the course of the film, when he loses his cattle, he becomes a for hire guy. And then you have Gannon, who is a judge. You know, technically he's working for like the state, but it's a territory without as much bureaucratic oversight. So he's got like his own little feudal fiefdom that is officially on the name of the law. And then like later on when they go to Dawson, like they're talking about how like there's no sheriffs there, like there's no law there. It is just kind of like this independent sort of community, but immediately in the movie all that stuff is going to be coming, so like these little sort of mini anarchist like prosperous towns at the edge of the frontier, like they can't last, like the denser social organization of like government and bureaucracy and all that, like it's gonna come sooner or later, and that it does come to Dawson by the
Yeah,
end
you
of
see
this.
this similar dynamic play out in Raoul Walsh's A World in His Arms, where you have like these freewheeling seamen, and then they have to enter into the more like solidified area of what the town is and the town's rules and their laws, and there's a clash there. Yeah, John McIntyre's character, he very much to me feels like a prototype for what we would later see in Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven with Gene Hackman's sheriff. This
Yes.
idea of, yeah, like the in the West, we have this recreation of feudal norms and feudal laws underneath the new guys. And I find that quite compelling as an idea. I mean, and many Westerns play around with this. There was, oh God, just slipped my mind. There was another one that I was thinking about. Oh, Anthony Mann's The Furies. Like this is
Mm,
all what The Furies is
yeah.
about. It's about this recreation of a dynastic world in the frontier, and I do like this because it like necessarily because you're drawing that point, you're confronting the idea of how to structure society, what a social system is made of, and how it functions. And so there is also this, yeah, this not only like a class analysis, but also like almost like a civilizational analysis of how this idea of the West is this new unvarnished thing where everyone can kind of be free or whatever, except for Native Americans who get killed, of course. But the ideological substructure of Manifest Destiny, it's fulfilled, and then what's made in its place is just another form of exploitation that is very similar to the ones that were found in Europe in the old world.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of the fact that we had Frontier and all this place for expansion, a lot of theorists have speculated is probably why like we never our labor we had a big strong labor movement in the urban areas, but like they never cohered into like a real labor party the way that a lot of European countries had. And a lot of theorists speculate that's because, like, in Europe, because there was almost nowhere for these, like, working class urban proletariat to go except America, all the tensions of capitalism were just exploded, because there was nowhere for them to go. So they had to form these, like, strong unions and strong, like, social labor parties. Whereas in America, all that tension could be
It was
off.
diffused.
Yeah, because you could just go west for free real estate, as Tim Heidecker would put it, and you could just go keep going to all this new territory and stake out your own little small holding claim. And so yeah, there was just a way to just literally let off steam by just expanding to all this land.
Yeah, to that point, there's also emphasis in these movies on the idea of like the immigrants who came to the West, right? So you
Yeah.
have her and her father here who come over and he's trying to learn to be a doctor, right? And like this idea of this is a place where you can kind of prove yourself in a different way that you couldn't otherwise and like establish just a new sense of self. And this also shows up in Winchester 73, where the movie has this picaresque journey where you have like the outlaws and you have the natives and like everyone gets a different grasp of this gun right at the center of the movie, but they're all part of different areas of society, but like the violence intersects them all. And I think man is very good at softly showing this like multifaceted uh naturalistic idea of what the West was. His these movies, despite whatever you can say about like, because I don't really believe in like, oh, this is aged badly. But if we were taking that perspective, I think these movies feel very contemporary. They feel very, there's a cynicism to them, there's a knowingness, there's a violence. They feel like movies that if you made a version of a Western now and you just made it exactly like this, more or less, people would be like, oh, this is like a revisionist, cynical take on something. But when you look back, you're like, well, wait a second, this was already happening in the so-called golden age of, before revisionism. So
Yeah.
it is quite different.
This one reminds me a lot of again, we were talking about the economics and like the feudalism. It reminds me of like a proto Deadwood in a way. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but like a lot of this, like Judge Gannon and having the gambling houses and like all of the competing economies and like later on when they go to Dawson, all of the claims being jumped, like it's very Deadwood-esque. So I think that like yeah, you're right. It does feel very contemporary in that way, and that one of the more famous contemporary westerns feels a lot like this movie uh, in its economic
I mean,
focus.
that's the bizarre thing, though, is that it's almost we feel this need to like, oh, this new thing reinvents everything with a fresh new perspective. Is it really new though? I the more and more older films that I watch, the more I realize that a lot of stuff that gets acclaimed today is just reinventing the wheel over again. And because people don't watch stuff from the past because they're not familiar with it, there's this ignorance and people pretend like this has never happened before. And I always just
No,
find it a bit, uh, I mean, because it can't be helped, I suppose, especially for people who are just new to things in general. But it's like if you do a bit of digging, you could just, uh, you can find stuff that definitely colors outside the lines. Like I just watched
no.
this Ida Lupino film called Outrage that
Mm,
like deals with sexual assault in a pretty frank way, and made in 1950, and you think like, hold on, wait a second, like things there were possibilities back then, not necessarily the way that we would do things now, but it wasn't. I think the idea of like, oh yeah, cinema was just like this totally repressed, like incredibly simplistic thing It's rarely that. It rarely is. So here, I love that Jack Elam is his main henchman. I fucking every time Jack Elam is in one of these westerns, I just celebrate. He's so good. I adore him.
Yeah,
He's You just immediately know it's him because of his bug eyes.
no, yeah, he has that type of face that you never see in like popular Hollywood movies anymore. Just
Or
these old
they've
school,
ironed out all the ugly people.
yeah, no, these old school heavies with these character faces. Bring them back. I want them back in movies. This guy, so Judge Gannon, he may be loosely based off of a there was a Western. He wasn't a judge, but he became such a wealthy criminal that he became like a man of society in a lot of these bigger Western cities and controlled a lot of the local economies there. He was called Soapy Smith. I think Gannon's appearance is mostly based off of his. He was big in he ran operations in like three different cities. We went from Denver to Alaska, and he controlled gambling houses and like all sorts of like local like economies. The way that he got his start, and the reason why he was called Soapy, was that he had a con game where he would be a soap salesman, and he'd have all these bars of soap, and he'd bring out a few dollar bills, and he'd wrap them around the soap, and then he'd wrap them all in brown paper, and he'd mix them up and be like, hey, if you buy a soap, you might get money. And then he knew which ones they were, and he'd have like a shill in the crowd, like one of his gang members who would buy the soap and be like, hey, I found $1. And then like he would get everybody to buy the rest of the soap, and then he'd say one of those bills was $100 bill, and then he would auction off the rest of the soap to the highest bidder. And then, every single person who got money was just one of his gang members. So he just fleeced people out of his money by saying that they could get money from buying soap. So that's why he's called Soapy Smith.
God, yeah, that is some old school hucksterism. Jesus. And now his type of people are just, you know, it's just I mean, I suppose it was always a common fabric of American life, but especially now, it's like that type of behavior. I think people would look at that and be like, "Oh, that's so cool! What a genius!"
No, yeah, he'd be selling male enhancement pills on the internet these days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got like,
And
fucking
it's
energy powder.
And something it's interesting about that Soapy Smith guy is that, and if this is that he grew up in like the South, and his family was a wealthy family. Like his grandfather was a plantation owner, and his father was an attorney. And then they met financial ruin at the close of the American Civil War, and they moved to Texas to start anew. And it was when he was a teenager in Texas that he first became a con man. So I think that there's it's kind of a microcosm of America. Like, oh, this old like these people who benefited from what was essentially a feudal order, they lost all of their money, during the war to end that. And so what do? They go out west for like new opportunity, and one of them becomes like a con man, like
Yeah,
like
he's a chieftain. Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of what happened with the gold rush, where the people who made all the money were, they didn't give a shit about gold. They were just like, I'm going to sell all the guys pickaxes and, and food and whatever else they need. That's kind of what we have here, right? Is that uh, Jimmy Stewart and Walter Brennan, their whole cattle situation here, like they need a bunch of stuff to set up, right? They need all this here and there. They don't have enough meat, like all these resources that it takes, right? And so if you're the guy who sells the resources, you're pretty set up, right? And of course, Gannon here he's aiming for the land as well, right? So you don't even have to be in like this direct sort of business. You just facilitate all the people who are coming to grab this or that territory. You help them and, quote unquote help them, right? But here he's obviously trying to like assert more direct control. And you get the feeling that in this movie he's overstepping his boundaries a bit. He's making a play, and that's where all the conflict arises from. Is that he's had it good and now he wants it better, and to do that he's gonna fuck over Jimmy Stewart and Walter Brennan.
Yeah, and it's funny because this whole like rush for resources and all of this dangerous like competition in games, like because throughout the whole movie, Walter Brennan, they're talking about, oh, we're gonna get our little farmhouse and our little ranch and like in Utah. So that's like the whole like Jeffersonian ideal that that was fucking Thomas Jefferson's vision of America. Was it would be like, oh, it would just be a bunch of like independent little smallholders who live in their own little pieces of land, like just like trading with each other and like so it's that idea of like, oh, we're gonna do the capitalist rush, we're gonna sell the cattle, we're gonna get the gold, but it's all gonna be so we can get like our own little place, like by ourselves. Like that's the whole capitalist dream. Is it like you do the rat race and your supposed reward for that is you get like your own little like mini piece of kingdom just to yourself, and
Well, and
like
that was a peculiarly American thing too, because it's like that didn't really exist in Europe. You were still forced to be a part of society. But there's this idea with American capitalism, with the American West, where it's almost as if like you're trying to exploit things enough to where you can almost like exist apart from society. Like there's an antisocial impulse to it. Like you're talking about, okay, yeah, we're doing trading and stuff, but also it's, you're over there, I'm over here. Don't fucking come on my land. That like this like libertarian type of ideology. And I find that fascinating. Like there's this idea of yeah, just like isolation and seclusion that goes into it. And when you have a situation where, the population is really booming in the 19th century, I imagine it's like, okay, we get these crowded cities, everything's stuffed up, everyone's working in factories. The idea of like being on a farm by yourself and not being accountable to a boss, right? You can understand why it was romanticized because, frankly, the alternative, it wasn't that great, right? Like being, working in like a meat slaughtering plant or whatever. You don't want to do that. You just want to be the guy with the cows. You don't, and I think too, honestly, when you think about it, like just logistically, the West was probably like a more safer, more sanitary place than the way that cities were structured back then. Like until you get to the 20th century, you don't have this idea of public health really. And so
no.
these cities are just, stewing with like dirty, filthy people, and everyone's just scrambling for their little tiny slice of something, and rarely do they ever get it. And so they're just all living together in squalor.
Oh yeah, no, and before cars, it was all horses. So think about like thousands and thousands of horses and all the manure that they were like leaving in the streets.
Yeah,
And
seems like a real
apparently,
nightmare.
yeah, apparently like New York was like the worst smelling place on like the planet because of the amount of horses and the amount of manure. Like I remember seeing an old like little humorous like cartoon in a newspaper of like all these ladies visiting the city and the tour conductor's like, all right, ladies, get your smelling salts, we're going outside. Apparently that's how bad it was. They would bring smelling
Yeah,
salts.
well, and there's all that stuff about how like London in the 19th century was just constructing, yeah, its like real version of like its sewer system that it has now. And it, it was necessary because yeah, like the smell was so fucking bad. Everything was so filthy. You had these factories belching out, smoke, and there was all this like, it was not a healthy place to live. And so when you have the idea of like, okay, well, here's the West, you can just go out in the middle of nowhere. No one's going to bother you. The air is clean. It's not like a place of, disease and like, festering, whatever. It doesn't take a great leap to understand like, okay, yeah, there'll be plenty of people like Jimmy Stewart was like, okay, well, I'm going to, take my chances, see what I can do and just rely on myself. And, if I can make it all the better. And I think it's like selling that kind of dream back to people. On one hand, it is ideology. On the other hand, it's rooted in, I think, a very real idea of just wanting something better. And it's interesting, like he comes out here and already he's like seeing that it's a bit too late, that people are already, it's already set up in such a way. And oh yeah, now we get this bit here where they cross over into Canada, right? Like they're
Mhm.
kind of like so far up that we're in like I don't know, like at least a British part of Canada. I don't know which part it would be.
It's funny you mentioned so when you mentioned the whole the antisocial nature of the like independence promised by America. That's part of what I find so moving about this movie is that it's about a man who very much thinks that that's the way of the world, who learns to appreciate and help the social more
Right.
because for so much of it he's like, no, you only got to look out for yourself, and like it's not my job, and like he seems to think that like people are just something that you negotiate with in order to get like your own thing.
Hmm.
And it's not until, later on when the young woman rescues him after he's been shot that, he starts to realize that like, oh, we don't have any of this without other people. Like you don't even have your own life without other people. And it's funny because we're now in the landscapes because we started out with a lot of interiors in this movie, and then when they make this journey to like the wilderness, it's because Skagway is a more developed city, but it's almost like when they set out to Canada and like the music swells where you see like all these like wilderness shots. It's almost like man is saying, okay, this is where we're gonna see who these people like really are. Like this is
Right,
where we're gonna
right.
see their character. Uh, and I think that's all. It's like the wilderness is always a place I think where in man movies where like you really find out who people are because like they're forced by circumstances into like action. Uh,
Right, because yeah, at the beginning there's a lot of posturing, and everyone's kind of posing against each other, and we don't really see the resolution of what those expectations are until yeah, we go out here and then we realize like, Jimmy's pulling a fast one on these people. Which yeah, I rewatched this recently. I just was like, this sly motherfucker.
And I'm also find the relationship that he has with Renee, the lady saloon owner, very interesting because she's someone else who like like him seems to have this idea of like life is just all you do is just negotiate with other people to get your own, and yet they seem to bond over that recognition of that mutual spirit in each other. So it's almost like they're both impressed by like what they see as the other's worldliness and their like play for yourself distrust of others, and that strange that antisocialness oddly enough like forms like a sexual tension between them and in terms of like recognizing a fellow spirit which I
Yeah,
find.
she's played by Ruth Roman, who was also in King Vidor's Lightning Strikes Twice. I think she's the lead in that. And yeah, kind of like a minor actress from this period, but I quite like her in this movie. She's good at the yeah, the kind of like the tough talking saloon lady who is very much, especially in the 50s, it feels like that becomes an archetype that's solidified when you
Yeah.
have like in Johnny Guitar or Rancher
Yeah.
Notorious. You have this idea of these women who own these businesses and they're sort of like matriarchs of the West.
And you've got that contrasted with sort of like the younger, sort of more selfless, more sort of pure-hearted young person who is all about like helping people out. Like she's helping that Austrian guy go to college, and I think even when Jimmy Stewart's like why would you do that? And she's like well, why wouldn't you do that? So I don't know. I guess maybe a belief in like youth. I don't know.
Well, I think it's more of just like a cultural thing. I think she's like, uh, very much just trying to make it with her father and believe in whatever they can. Yeah, that actress, Corinne Calvet. Okay, I don't remember her in this movie, but she's in Albert PM's The Sword and the Sorcerer, apparently. So I need to fucking check that out because that's a. I mean, I've already seen the movie, but I fucking need to watch it again because I don't remember her in it. Maybe she plays some kind of like old witch in that.
Are these is this whole sequence from when he rustles the cattle back? Are they doing a day for night? Because I gotta say, the way they're doing it in this, if that's what they're doing, looks really nice here. Like this sort of blue.
Yeah, I think it is day for night, basically. Yeah, but it's cool because it's very atmospheric. It presents itself. I have to wonder in this type of locale, the light the light is different, right? When you're shooting up in
Right.
these mountains, and it. I have to wonder if the atmospherics of the place do help with that, and just doing day for night because it does. It's very cloudy, very overcast in these scenes. Also, the fact that you have these deep, dark woods, I think, helps out a lot. I would like
Uh,
for someone to shoot day for night like this again. Why not? It's an interesting stylistic choice. People go on and on about everything has to be realistic. You could do something cool here. Like just have it be. It communicates a warm, dreamy, romantic feeling to me.
yeah, no, it very much has a painterly quality to it. Jimmy Stewart, because this Jimmy Stewart's run in the 50s has got to be one of the all-time great like actor
Oh,
reinventions.
yeah, he's cooking on an unforeseen level in the 50s.
Just, I mean, I can't, I have to imagine that like his war experiences may have been a part of that like desire, like, because I mean,
Yeah, no doubt.
he was like a full-on like squadron commander on like some of the biggest bombing raids in all of like World War II. Like, I think he was the first major actor to like enlist in World War II before it even started. I think he enlisted in March of like 41. And I think he got to colonel by the end of the war, which is nuts. Uh, yeah, and he he I never knew this. You know that he had two one-season television shows in the 1970s, Jimmy Stewart?
Really?
Yeah, the first one was a sitcom, which he didn't like doing because he didn't like the amount of work that you had to do every week, and then it got bad ratings and bad reviews, and he was very glad that it got canceled. It was called The Jimmy Stewart Show, and then he did one more show. I think it was called Hawkins, and he was willing to give TV one more shot because it was like a mystery drama. But then he actually requested that the show be canceled because he was not convinced that scripts and directing could be as good as it was in features. So yeah, he did two one-season TV shows in the 70s, and that was that for him in TV.
Yeah, I just found this out in 1980. He he worked with this experimental like new wave documentary director, Suzumu Hani, and he did like a film with him and what's called A Tale of Africa or Green Horizon. And it's just fascinating that like this old ass Jimmy Stewart, he's like, who I'm working with? We're working with like this like experimental Japanese director, and we're going to Africa. I need to see this movie because it seems super cool. Yeah, Stewart. I mean, his filmography, it's hard to fuck with, right? Because he works with Lubitsch. He fucking does all these Anthony Mann movies. He works with Ford. He does all the Hitchcocks, Capra. I mean, it's uh, it's not to be underestimated that the guy just had exceptional taste as an actor for what he wanted to do with his time. I
And
mean, and he did the like the late Don Siegel movie, The Shootist too. Like he kind of he had his finger on the pulse of a lot of interesting artists that were in Hollywood at the time, and at the time meaning like decades and decades.
no, he has one of the all-time great resumes. Do you know
Oh,
that
how could I
his?
forget George Cukor's Philadelphia Story? Oh my God,
Oh,
he's
of course.
magnificent in that film.
Yeah, it's the one time he ever won a Best Actor. You know that his last ever role ever was as the sheriff in An American Tale: Fievel Goes West.
Oh, is that the sequel?
Yeah, that's the sequel to An American Tale. It's the one where Fievel goes to the Old West, and Jimmy Stewart voices like this old dog sheriff, And yeah, that you know what? Honestly, now that I think about it, I think that was probably my first ever exposure to him was his last movie in Five Goes West. So yeah, that was his last ever movie, which I kind of like that it's a Western, even if it's like
Is
a
that a good film?
silly. I don't remember. I was a kid when I saw it. I'd have to see it again to see if it was any good, but I mean,
So
I
five was
like
the
that.
mouse, right?
Yeah, Fievel's the mouse. Yeah, so he goes to like an old Western town. But yeah, that was his last ever movie. Uh, I know near the end of his he didn't do as many movies because he started having a hearing impairment and it caused him to flub his lines a lot and miss his cues. But he apparently he was too proud to wear a hearing aid. So
That's interesting.
that's why he didn't do as many movies near the last couple decades of his life.
Oh, he
But
worked with Robert Aldrich as well. Good taste, good
oh
taste. Good on my man. Fuck, he's just working with the best and the brightest. So cool.
yeah, he really did have like a wonderful technique. Just very very present. It doesn't have to do a whole lot.
Well,
It's
it's
funny because
fascinating because in a way he's very malleable depending on the material. He could do a lot of different things, but it's in a lot of those early films there was sort of a how do I want to say it? There was almost like a nebbishness or a um I don't want to say nerdy because that's not quite right, but do you know what I mean? Like in Shop Around
right,
the
what do you
Corner,
mean?
he like there's like a sardonic quality to him. There's a little bit of like he's he's kind of like a he's what would you even say? He's just like an off-center type of guy, and then he becomes this like archetypal all-American whatever. But then, and you see this in It's a Wonderful Life, there's like this psychotic aspect as well, which is then explored in a lot of these Anthony Mann movies and in the Hitchcocks. And then in the Ford films, he very much feels like, at least in Two Road Together, there is that intensity, but he feels like a classical sort of Ford hero, in a great way. And I think he just was extraordinarily sensitive to what directors required of him, and he was able to really. He had his persona, but he wasn't chained to it, and he did push his own boundaries, which I like quite a lot. Because you think like, after you made all these Frank Capra movies, he's gonna go, do westerns now, but it works really well. I love these films.
No, yeah.
It's a shame that him and Mann fell out. I love Man of the West. I think it's a perfect movie. I would like to see an alternate version with Stewart in that role because it is
Yeah,
different between him and Cooper. Because Cooper seems like Cooper's more archetypal. He's more like he carries with him this imaginal quality of the movie star. Whereas I think Jimmy Stewart, it would have been much more like uh, visceral, and I think maybe a little bit like less. I don't know because like Man of the West is a very violent movie. I almost wonder if because like Cooper's so dignified in that you do feel this like contrast between him and then the character he's playing, and I think it's a productive contrast. But I think Stewart would have been a bit more believable as like a guy who used to be, sort of an outlaw and used to be, a violent man. Whereas the Cooper, you kind of feel like, oh man, there's something almost sad and poignant about this guy who really has changed, but the world doesn't want him to.
I do agree that there is a lot of that in that movie. I do think that when Gary Cooper has the fist fight with that guy and then he strips him naked, I do think you get a real scary sense of like anger from Cooper in that scene. Like I agree that he's
Yeah,
dignified
no,
for that movie.
I agree. I think it works really great. I think like basically with Stewart, it would have been a bit more straightforward. Was it Cooper? There's this idea that like he stands so high and so straight that when he does have that fist fight, it almost is more violent because you're not used to seeing him like that. He's supposed to be this guy who's like just the eternal upstanding good dude, and to just see him like engage with that, uh, it just like violates everything, and and really creates an atmosphere in that movie of like transgression almost, especially of his image.
Oh, and speaking of alternative casting involving Jimmy Stewart, I cannot believe that I did not know this until yesterday when I was looking up stuff for this recording. Do you know that Jimmy Stewart was I mean, as much as I love Peter Finch in this role, do you know that Jimmy Stewart was offered Howard Beale in Network?
Really? Oh, okay. But he couldn't do that because of the hearing thing.
No, he turned it down because he didn't like how much profanity there was in the script.
Well, what can you do about that?
I think Peter Finch was great, but I'm not gonna lie, I would have loved to have seen Jimmy Stewart play that part because I just think the
Hearing Jimmy Stewart
meta,
swear.
yeah, and I just think the meta element of like, oh, we're gonna take the guy who like people knew as like America's like best friend, and we're gonna make him like just like this sort of like empty shell who just raves on about nonsense while like America burns to the ground. Like I think having Jimmy Stewart do that, I think would just
Yeah,
lend
it's
such
very
a.
perverse casting.
But no, he just couldn't handle. No, just couldn't handle all the bad words. I don't think you need to use
Oh,
words like that to get your point across.
that's a pretty good impersonation. Good job. My hat goes off to you. Not bad.
Oh, well, thank you, Yoy. Well, all I can do is play my accordion and get shit faced and call it a
Yeah,
day.
accordion.
Well,
Okay.
you know that he was a mute. Well, he can't. He played the accordion. He apparently
Oh,
was
he
pretty good
did?
at it. Yeah, he
Oh,
came
cool.
from like a very musical family. Like all of his family members played instruments. It's funny.
That's curious because he was never really in a musical, was he?
No, I think there's one movie where like he gets to play his accordion on screen, and I think it was actually I think it was the movie that he and Mann split over. I think it was Night Passage, which was originally
Oh.
offered to Anthony Mann, but then I think he said something like he just wanted to play his accordion or something. But yeah, he was such a musical guy that one of the last projects that he did a TV movie in the '80s that was produced by the Jesus Christ Church of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormons. And for the movie, I don't know anything about the story, that apparently he got to conduct for a scene the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, which apparently was like a big dream of his
Yeah,
to
well,
do.
okay then.
Oh, I love, yeah, so this whole sequence with
Yeah, this bit is great. Speaking of nature, just having this avalanche, it's photographed very well. And so what he's shooting here, did they actually cause an avalanche? Did they just like
I
they must have, right? Because I don't think it's archival footage.
no, yeah, like it looks like it's the same quality as like the other shot. So maybe they set off like a controlled detonation or something. I'm not
They might
sure.
have, yeah, yeah. So, okay. Do I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not an environmental expert of any kind. But this bullshit in movies where like people walking by, oh, if you say one thing a little bit too loud, or like, this idea that like you can cause an avalanche just through the tiniest thing. I mean, obviously physically, I understand that's true, but has this happened to people? Like, is this like not that, okay, I don't think you survive an avalanche, although maybe I'm wrong. But I watch movies and I see this kind of stuff and I think, is this real or is this just something that's made up for movies? Because I can never tell, because it's not like I'm gonna go near a fucking giant snowbank and test it, right? But I think about these things and I just wonder, like, is this like a just a totally manufactured cliche? What do you think?
I have no clue. I do not want to speak on matters that I am completely ignorant of. But I don't know. It's
What does your
fun.
gut tell you?
My gut tells me I feel like you would have to be screaming pretty damn loud in order to do that. Maybe it would have to be like multiple people as opposed to just one. But I don't know. Um You know what? I'm gonna say that I doubt it. I doubt it. I'll go with that. But I like that scene because like in relation to the arc of Stewart's character, you know, him being like because at
Right, well, he's
first
just like leaving behind.
yeah, he's like leaving behind, but it's when you know, it's when she goes off and then Walter Brennan's like, you know, it's wrong. And because I like this idea of like, you know, we have to like this idea that like no, we have to help each other out because just nature itself is just so dangerous that like you know it's like what other choice do you have other than to like you know help other people like life itself even disregarding Judge Gannon and all the corruption and all the human conflict just the world itself will just be in conflict with people and so you've got to help other people because it's like you know how can you face stuff you know like just nature without other people helping you out, you know? And then, which is why
Right.
the libertarian conception of like human nature is like, oh, it's just it's natural for humans to only look out for themselves and like only compete with one another. Then how did we build all this? I mean,
Exactly. It's one of those things that's so evidently false that you have to wonder why people seriously believe this.
like you literally
It's the only
speak
thing you could
words.
convince yourself of if you're like a teenager, I feel. You know.
Yeah, like the words that you're using weren't invented by you. Like you had to learn them from other people.
No, Jason, I invented my own language that only I speak, so no one can understand me.
Oh, so you're like you should form your own band and sing songs in your made up language,
That no one can get.
like
I love
multiple
this.
musical artists that like you
Oh,
know.
these mountains are gorgeous. Fucking hell.
Oh wow, yeah, wow, my God, yeah. Oh my
So I
God.
went to Colorado recently, and I did go up one of the mountains. It wasn't as big as this. Like these mountains are like it's a sheer fucking drop. The ones I went up, there was like a you could you know there was a place to go. You could climb up them, and it was like there was a path, you know. Whereas this, I just have to wonder, man. Okay, for anyone's who's a fucking mountain climber, this is the truly maniac lunatic stuff, and I know for sure that people have probably done this.
Yeah, and you were talking about how like McMahon's westerns are like they're so like psychological. Well, it's like you know his landscapes like they're very like rugged. You know, Ford loved Monument Valley, which is a very clean landscape, and the formations in that have very clean geometrical shapes, whereas like the landscapes in Mann's movies are very rugged, jagged.
There's a lot of
Uh,
forests. He likes to have forests in his movies and mountains and hills. Like there's a vertical aspect to them. Same thing with Delmer Daves. That really impressed itself upon me when watching his movies. Is I think there's like westerns that emphasize uh, horizontal, yeah, like lines, geometry, that sort of thing. And there's ones that emphasize vertical terrain and climbing. And I think people like Dave's and Mann definitely mix in a good deal of the vertical space, which I like quite a lot because it's very dynamic to look at.
yeah, I know. Mann likes his horizon lines very high. I think you know compared to Ford, who liked his horizon lines very low. Uh, they always seem to be high in the picture in a man movie.
One of these days I should do a commentary for Henry Hathaway. Well, maybe not a Western, maybe just anything that he's done. I like him quite a bit. He did. He's also one of these guys where like he didn't make a ton of them before the war, but after the war, it was just like he became, just made a bunch of westerns, just all kinds of various varieties. And he worked with uh, Ford and Stewart on doing the big epic in Cinerama, How the West Was Won, which is still something I have to see. I want to see it in the Smile Box version, which I have to look for it because it's not super common.
What's the Smile Box version?
It's basically the version that replicates the curvature of the
Ah,
Cinerama screen. So like things aren't just it's not just like okay, we made it square. Like it actually when you look at like I took screenshots of another one where it has like it's wider on the ends of the frame and the middle is the thin part. And so it's like it's called Smilebox is in like in the releases. It's very cool. I mean, it's like such a rarefied thing, and it was never gonna catch on, I suppose. But I and like what there's like two or three movies that were actually filmed in that format. But I love it because it's just so strange. It's such a strange way to make a movie. And yeah, Hathaway directed most of that, and then Ford did a segment in the Civil War. But that was like a big all-star cast, which Stewart was a part of.
Yeah, I know that was another one that my dad really liked. I think I think we actually watched part of it, but then we couldn't see the whole thing. I remember an old folk song that was a big part of it, 15 Miles in the Erie Canal, which is a really cool old
Oh,
haunting
you
folk.
know what? I feel like I've heard that song before.
No, it's awesome. It's just one of those old like, well, we gotta get up and move on to where the work is type of old folk songs, which were pretty common back then. So you were the just want to give a quick shout out to the DP of this movie, William Daniels. He was a great Hollywood DP. He worked with Anthony Mann on Winchester 73 as well. He
And this
got
is
his
one of these
start.
crazy old school guys where he worked on just dozens of masterpieces and worked with like all these. Yeah, he did fucking Stroheim's Greed. He
Yeah,
worked with he did quite a few Stroheim movies. He worked with
I think
Q-Core.
he got his start on Foolish Wives. I think that was his first credit.
Oh, he did
Yeah,
Douglas Sirk's Thunder on the Hill. Yeah, he worked with a lot of. Yeah, he's a Q-Core guy. This is interesting.
he he worked with Greta Garbo on her first movie, and then after that, she demanded that he be her cinematographer for her movies, and I think he did most, if not all, of Greta Garbo's movies after she came to America. So, like pretty much,
Oh, so he is the cinematographer that she was like, "This is my guy." Okay.
yeah, William H. Daniels. So, yeah, a big part of why we associate Greta Garbo as having a certain look is because of the way that he lit her.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Wow. Yeah, I gotta say, like, people go on about, you know, I don't know. I don't want to insult anyone, but just insert contemporary famous cinematographer here. You could probably, come up with whatever examples you want to. And not to like do them any disservice. There's a lot of great talented people working today, and God bless them. They're doing just I don't know, like movies today are very beautiful, is what I'm saying. But these old school guys who just worked and worked and worked, you look at the fucking, you look at the Wikipedia page, and it just, I think to myself, man, how no one's ever going to match up to this, just because the economic circumstances of filmmaking are so profoundly different. You're never going to have like dozens of DPs who just were like, oh yeah, I'm just, like you just think to yourself, like, how could this happen? How could you? And they did stellar work in different forms for ages and ages, and for so many different types of movies. And it's like
Yeah,
these
they
were
were
true old
so
school pros.
versatile. I mean, we like with this cinematographer. Look at the way that a movie like this like looks, and then look at the way that a movie like one of Greta Garbo's silent movies looks.
Well,
It's
because
a
he shot
totally
both this and Winchester 73, right? So I was talking about the differences between these two movies, but he shot both of them, right? So
yeah. No, yeah, a lot of these old school DPs they really could do anything. Uh,
see, this is a classic board and chase dialogue. I trusted a man once. I trusted a woman once.
I also in a little bit he because they were about to like push out and then he oh yeah in this bit right here they outbid each other for the claim and I like how, Jimmy Stewart, he was about to pull out, he was about to settle, but hey, an attractive woman he likes is gonna undercut this guy. No, I gotta compete with her. So, it's what horniness will do to a motherfucker. It'll just keep him in the
Well,
game. It won't.
you get the impression that she's done this with a lot of men over the course of her tenure in the West. Another DP, similar to what we're talking about that I'm obsessed with, is Lucien Ballard.
Oh
I mean,
yeah. Oh
this
yeah.
fucking guy, he's just one of these guys.
He did The Hustler, right? Was that him?
No, he
No.
did Kubrick's The Killing. He did a lot with
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Sternberg, Peckinpah, Hathaway.
Okay, yeah. No, okay.
Um,
I'm looking at
he
his
shot
resume.
movies for Tourneur and John Sturges and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, he did a couple Sternbergs, Morocco,
Walsh,
uh,
yeah.
The Devil is a Woman.
Okay, so this is a bizarre thing. Apparently, this film has four composers.
Wait, really?
Yeah, apparently.
Okay. Did they reuse music from other movies? Is that why there's
I
like,
have to wonder, maybe. I don't know too much about film composing, but it seems like that might have been a common practice.
but yeah, this whole
You
like
ever
the
pan
whole
for
like
gold?
oh me I think I did a little bit when like I visited historical gold rush locations in California. I've never actually like seriously done it, but like how they'll do a little tour and at the end they're like, "Hey, you can pan for gold too." And there's not any gold in there, but like uh I've done I think that's
Hold on, they would
the
lie to you like that?
uh I mean, I don't know. If there is gold, it's probably like a single like grain or something. They're not gonna let you have like gold. Uh but I mean it's not I mean I don't even think there's a lot of places left where you can really pan for gold. I think it's all been
Yeah,
scrapped.
I see occasional videos on YouTube where people talk about like, oh, I found gold in this river or whatever. I always wonder, like, hold on, this just like what rivers are we going to where there's just gold hanging out? It feels like people would have cottoned on to this sooner rather than later, but maybe not. I never done it. It seems fun, but it also seems very tedious. And you look at like what they're doing here, where they got all this like set up with the sort of slides, right? And you see this a lot in Delmer Daves' The Hanging Tree. These prospecting towns where like there's these huge vertical slides where water just rushes through and like it's you're not panning for gold, you're almost funneling for gold, I suppose. And yeah, it's like I imagine they got a good deal of whatever could be gotten in that process. Well, maybe there's more. But that's what I wonder too. How long does it take for gold to form? I suppose that equals has something to do with like volcanic mineral processes over the centuries.
Yeah, and it's not something which can be renewed overnight, I mean
Yeah, well,
that's
it's probably
the
the
thing
same
about.
amount of time that it takes for oil to be created.
Yeah, no, most of these resources we eat up are not renewable, which is something else. Like their whole dream, right? We talked about the whole I'm gonna get my own plot of land, but like they just can't stop. Like like the scene with the bar owner. Like it's like no, like the third like the just the addiction of like just accumulating. Like you can't stop because it's like if it's like if you don't have real community, what are you going to fill that space with? Just getting
More stuff.
more. Yeah, more accomplishment to replace connection.
It is interesting too that these encampments, they are, in a very real sense, they're transforming the landscape. It's terraforming. These in Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider, they show this quite a bit, where they have some kind of gold encampment there, but they have these like water jets that they would bring in to just blast away the huge, mountains of soil, and they would just whoosh, just wash it all away just to, uh, you know, loosen the silver and the gold and whatever else they could find in there. And like apparently they would like put chemicals in that too, and they would like the chemicals that they would use still exist in a lot of reservoirs and bodies of water. And it's like stuff that's not going to go away for hundreds of years because, some prospector put mercury in to, help filter out the gold that he was like just sifting through these mountains of soil. I forget what it was called. Yeah, it was like, but yeah, they would just use these water jets and whoosh, like a fire hose and blast everything away.
No, I remember those scenes in Pale Rider, and I remember that they cut back to the teenage girl when she's looking at them, and I think she even says that they look like this looks like hell. Like there's a lot of like direct comparisons in that movie to like Western resource extraction with like hell and like I think Mammon is invoked
Yes.
to talk about like industry and money in that movie. So. Yeah, there's a lot like capitalism as satanic. I like that comparison.
Yeah, I mean that's also during like the crazy era of stuff where just no one, no one knew what any of the effects of all this would have, and it's like fucking, people were just doing the most bizarre things just because it felt expedient at the time, and now we're feeling the ramifications of, just I think supposedly innocent prospecting, right? Although of course it was always loaded with a bunch of conditions that were not always acknowledged.
I love the way that Stewart's positioned just right at the corner with that edge tension, and the way that like the
Yeah,
crowd.
well, man's great at staging. He's always good at like just making the most out of everything. Because this being his first widescreen movie, yeah, he does a great job. Later do great with scope and all that. He was a natural.
I definitely would want to see. Have you ever seen The Fall of the Roman Empire? One of the last
No,
movies that he did.
I have a bunch of his later movies on DVD on my desk here. I need to get to them. I want to. It's Fall of the Roman Empire is a pretty long movie, but I do want to get to it because it's like my type of shit. I've been actually on and off. I've been picking into the Edward Gibbon book that it kind of gets its title from, and
Mm.
man, interesting stuff. Gotta tell you, my one takeaway from reading that book is that no one ever learns anything. Is my takeaway.
Wow, that's unfortunate. Discouraging, but you can't give up. You got to keep trying. But I
Well,
also really
maybe that's not wrong. Maybe people learn things, but maybe they also don't act on that learning all the time.
I recommend El Cid. I got to see it at the Turner Classic Movies Film Festival last year. Really good. I
Yeah,
think.
David Thompson says that that's Anthony Mann's best movie. It sounds super cool.
Oh, David Thompson, you said?
Yeah, the guy who wrote was it the encyclopedia? No, like what was it? It's like Biographical Dictionary of American Film. Yeah, that's it. It's this huge book which I adore. I constantly flick through it. It's just like great encyclopedia of filmmakers and stars, and basically it's one of those books where you just get lost in it because it's a huge, great reference guide. But yeah, he
No,
talks about
I
Anthony
definitely.
Mann, and he loves Anthony Mann, and he just goes into like, Anthony Mann was better than John Ford and all this stuff, and yeah, he talks in his little entry on him that El Cid was like above and beyond, his greatest masterpiece, and so that made me excited to see it, and I have it right here, so I will get to it. I hope so. Maybe this year. You know what? Fuck it. Yeah, this year. I'll try to get to it next month even.
Hell yeah. No, it's a good one. I mean, it has the incredible 70 millimeter photography that you would expect from man. And that's a very interesting. I think that one's all about like, like the tension between like like socially ordained roles and the feelings that he has for Sophia Loren's character and about sort of the contradictions of like their whole chivalric honor system. It's a cool movie. Definitely worth a watch. I
Yeah.
know
So
that
have you seen Mann's early films?
the earliest movies of his that I've seen would be T-Men and Raw Deal, but I know he did movies before that, so I haven't seen any
Yeah.
movies
I
before
haven't
that.
seen a lot of those super early ones, but I will eventually. Uh, yeah, he's an interesting. He's a part of like what I'm growing to call the like this neoclassical generation of Hollywood filmmakers, like filmmakers who basically started out in the 1940s, who worked through the studio system as assistant directors or producers or whatever, and like people like him and Delmer Daves and Otto Preminger and Bud Bedecker and Vincent Minnelli, like they all kind of started around the same time, and I think they they were filmmakers who came in after Hollywood was already established and had its golden age. And so then when they're making their work in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, they're kind of pushing things in all these different boundaries, Robert Aldrich is one of these people, John Sturges. And yeah, I find that whole generation fascinating for how like they took things and like they had this classical attitude, but they very much were like, venturing more into you know, territory that just wasn't explored before, or maybe explored before, but just not in the way that they were doing it. And like they were the first generation of American directors to really take advantage of things like color and widescreen and all this. And Mann is a central guy when it comes to all that. But do you see what I'm talking about? Like, there's kind of this whole coterie of these directors. Maybe not necessarily, formally similar, but it feels like a distinct like Anthony Mann feels like he's of a distinct generation away from people like Ford or Walsh, right?
No,
And I think
I
like
definitely
the dividing
agree.
line to me is someone like Wells, right? I think Wells is a part of this too.
Yeah, he's kind of like the mediator between like that first classical generation and then like what you just called the neoclassicists. I would say Nicholas Ray is in that category of all the
Oh
other
yes,
people you
totally.
mentioned. Like, uh,
Yeah, Nick
yeah,
Ray, Don Siegel, these types of guys.
I haven't. So Nicholas Ray, wait, no, damn it, forgot what I was going to say. Oh
You know,
man, it's
I
a
just to
random
say
little
about Nick
movie.
Ray, like Nick Ray is pretty similar to Mann in a lot of ways. A bit less bound by genre, but when I watch the films, there's a similar intensity between them.
No, yeah, I know what you mean. There's an intense psychology to his characters. They're often at the edge of society. It's funny that you mentioned Nick Ray because I started half of a movie. I need to get to the other half. Like Anthony Mann, this was an epic that he did near the end of his career, early '60s. King of Kings, the Jesus movie. You ever see
Oh
that one?
yes, I haven't seen it. I've never heard anyone talk about this movie. Have you seen this?
Okay, so I'm halfway through. It's interesting because it's a very strange contradiction of tones because I forget who wrote it, but he was a pretty notable Hollywood writer who wrote some good movies. On the one hand, it has the sort of pious, sanctimonious scenes that like you would expect from a movie about Jesus from the early 60s. You know, Jesus is like this perfect, holy, otherworldly guy, and he's speaking all of like his little like lessons, and like you have characters speaking very solemnly, like like I am John the Baptist, I have come to pave the way for he who shall like
Right.
shepherd your
There's a
flock.
rhetorical
Right.
Shakespearean aspect to it.
So there's that, but at the same time, it's kind of like the Cecil B. DeMille thing of like, well, as long as we have like a moral and as long as we have like some good, pure people, we can show all of the licentious, explicit, and racy stuff that the moral is meant to be against, right? So you have this sanctimonious stuff, but then you have like these like incredibly violent battle scenes, and that's where Nicholas Ray really cuts loose and just directs the hell out of it. And like you had like I don't know, like Herod's stepdaughter Salome and how she does the dance and asks for John the Baptist's head. Like they really play the incestuous angle of that. And when she does the dance for John the Baptist's head, it's like so sexual and like so provocative. So yeah, it is this very strange contradiction of like opposite tones so far from what I've watched.
Cool, cool. So I'm looking up the writer, and this is one of our guys, Philip Jordan. Johnny Guitar, The Big Combo, Man from Laramie, Day of the Outlaw, El Cid, Fall of the Roman Empire, Detective Story. So like he's worked with both Ray and Mann. So that's another connection here. Yeah, he's done quite a number of films with both of them. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, great writer. Fucking yeah, I need to get to some of these movies. Yeah, I always get King of Kings confused with the John Huston Bible movie. I forget what that
Uh,
was. That the greatest story ever told? Is that what I'm thinking
Greatest
of?
story ever told was George Stevens, which was another Jesus. The
Oh,
John Huston
okay.
Bible movie is In the Beginning, which I think is about Genesis.
Really? Okay. That's strange. Him doing a Genesis movie. I can't even imagine that. You know what
Yeah,
would be
so this
interesting
whole
is like doing like just an entire Bible, but just only doing these Hollywood movies about the Bible. You could probably get a fair ways into it, right? Because they really plumb that depth, right? They were just telling stories about every single figure and you know, just yeah, I struggle with those films sometimes. Sometimes they can be very cool. A lot of the time there's an interminable, monolithic monotonous quality that I find. Like I watched the one of the ones that Raoul Walsh did called Esther and the King. It's a cool movie, but it's just like it's very like yeah, heavy-handed and lugubrious and just kind of like this isn't really what Walsh does best, you know? Like I'm kind of like this isn't a mode that I'm super into. I like him doing because he does his own individual take, but the whole style of filmmaking it's one of those things people talk about like we used to make things in this country. Sometimes I think okay but there's also some things maybe if we left that style of filmmaking in the past it's maybe not a bad thing. Not that we can't make movies about biblical topics or whatever. I'm down for that, but the specific type of biblical epic that DeMille created, I have to wonder if it's very much seen its day, because what the last one that we had that was a mainstream movie was something like Exodus Gods and Kings, right? And
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
that
but the thing is, though,
movie.
weirdly now, I don't know. I don't. Does anyone like the stuff like that you see in theaters, like The Chosen, or like these? I don't even know if they're TV shows or whatever. Like this, like these biblical movies that show all the time in theaters, at least around me, and I assume across the country in various theaters. I never hear anyone talk about this shit. They seem to solely exist for just the church going evangelical, let's all take everyone to go to this kind of thing. Like it, that's a different thing too, because that's not like the DeMille thing. Like they're doing their own. It's they're basically independent movies almost, right? They're not studio films, so
Yeah,
that's
or like
different, right?
the Angel Studios biblical movies.
Yeah, yeah. Angel Studios is a part of this too. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, what do you think about that type of film?
I don't
Because
know
I
because
like
I
the Anthony Mann thing, where like he's like, let me just make a film about the Roman Empire. I'm like, okay, cool. It's like a historical thing, but like the heavy-handed biblical stuff, where you have to tell the audience about how it's you should be a good person or whatever. Like, I find it kind of dull.
yeah, no, I definitely. I mean, like I said, I'm definitely getting a lot of that like from King of Kings, and I mean, like I said, it's interesting to watch because the parts that are like explicit and like violent and sexual are like very interesting because it's in the same movie as the stuff which is like
That was
sanctimonious
the
and
DeMille
pious.
thing, right? Is that he would have all the pious stuff for the Bible thumpers in the audience, but then in his biblical epics, you would also have like ultra violence and sexuality. Like, you know what I mean? Like he could get away with that stuff because he'd be like, "Oh, but it's in the Bible, though." And of course, then at the end of the movie, you would have the main actor being like, "Oh yes," and Jesus is king, and like all this kind of stuff. So it's like kind of like you the right hand is doing one thing and the left hand is doing another, right? So is that kind of what we're talking about with the King of Kings?
Oh yeah, so far absolutely. Yeah, it's I think we are definitely getting like that vibe because like like Salome is like so sexual and John the Baptist keeps hammering home like you are a child of incest, like you can choose to walk away from this calumny and then she asks for his head so that there's very much like we're gonna do all this stuff, but then like we'll judge it like directly,
Right.
so
Have
that
you
we can
seen
have.
uh Ken Russell's Salome's Last Dance?
I have not. No, Ken Russell's pretty
Oh,
underexplored for me. I've only seen a couple of his movies.
super cool movie. I mean, I would not say don't start with that because it's like a more Ken Russell deep cut. It's a bit, it's a bit esoteric, but it's basically him doing the Oscar Wilde Salome play, but he's staging it as a play being done for Oscar Wilde, right? So like there's like a troupe of performers and Wilde just like sits back and he watches as they do his play for him. And it's it's the typical like Ken Russell, very exaggerated, quasi-expressionistic, loud, garish, hyperbolic thing, which I love. Uh, but it's just funny, like him doing a biblical topic like that, even through like the filter of Wilde, right? Because the Wilde, he has his own take on it, which is more, yeah, like kind of decadent and atheistic. But then Ken Russell doing it, it just becomes this, you know, just this insane, very camp sort of thing. That's the kind of stuff I like. When you take that material, like, you know, Salome and the head of, bring me the head of John the Baptist. Like, it just becomes this, the garishness I just adore. But that's what I kind of want in general. I just want interesting filmmakers to take material because ultimately I think, you know, regardless of what the material is, if you do it in an interesting way, that's all that matters, right? You don't. I care less about because the Bible is like a canvas, right? And you kind of do what you want with it. Everyone's gonna have a different take.
Well, that's why I'm so interested for when you see the Gospel according to Saint Matthew, because what's so amazing about that movie is that in many ways it's the most accurate because all the dialogue is taken directly from the text, but like just the way that he shoots it and stages it and plays it is like unlike any other biblical movie. Like in King of Kings, when there's a scene where like Jesus heals a blind man, it's like this big, like long shot that's like beautifully lit against like a white wall, and you see like the giant shadow of Jesus's hand come, and you see all this light
It's like
shine on the
Nosferatu.
blind man. Yeah, and all this music, yeah, like Nosferatu, and all this music is playing, and it's healed, right? And it's this big special effect of showing like the holy power of God. And then in Gospel according to Saint Matthew, I remember there's this bit where like a man with a physical deformity, he just goes, it's a single shot of him, and he's like, Jesus, can you please heal me? And it's like documentary style, handheld, cuts to Jesus, and he just says, I bless you, my child. You are healed. Cut back to the man, and he's healed. He's just a normal guy. Like there's no
There you
special
go.
effect. Like there's no swelling music. There's no crazy light. It's just cut, cut. He's healed. The movie just asks you to believe that he's healed. It doesn't have to show
Exactly.
you.
It's the neorealist miracle, which honestly, okay, much as I love like the big showy stuff, and I do, that kind of stuff is also interesting to me. Just uh, the mundanity of it, which nevertheless contains miracles. I like that approach as well a lot.
No, yeah, it's a cool movie. And yeah, so this whole thing here, like, because like when she talks about how like she confesses love and she talks about wanting to cut out and like get away, because like now he's thinking of no, I want to stay and I want to like try and help make
Right.
this
Well,
town
this is the
become
come to
like.
Jesus moment, right? That you have in every Anthony Mann movie where there's like a point where things could go one way or the other. And you know what else I like too about especially these Jimmy Stewart movies because he sells it so well. There's a lot of movies now where like so much shit happens to characters, and it just doesn't affect them. Like they get shot and they no sell it, and it's like whatever. Everything's taken very lightly. I like in Anthony Mann, his movies, when people get hurt, their arms are in slings, they can't shoot their guns, they're pained, they're like coughing, they're suffocating, they're sick. Like there's a real physical uh exploration of like just pain and suffering. And it's not so morbid, I would say. Like it's not done in a like an exploitative way or anything like that. But I think it's like he takes the reality of that seriously, So it's not just like, oh, I'm hurt for one scene and then I'm okay then, Like this stuff has lasting effects. And Jimmy Stewart's character has been so hyper competent of this entire movie to see him, damaged to where he's having trouble firing his gun and he has to practice with the other hand. It means something. It matters to the viewer because we're not just trivializing what's happening on screen. There is a reality to it that is visceral, that is potent, and that shows the vulnerability of all the characters here. So we're invested in it because actually we don't know what's going to happen. Because if the movie takes its own dramatic stakes seriously in the way that this movie does, we're we're equally as vulnerable as Stewart in these final scenes. He could get shot, and it feels like it. There's a dirty, like hard Scrabble quality to it. It's not archetypal. It's not mythic. It's just you know uh, a man who's broken, who's trying to change his life, and he's firing away at the dirt.
Well, yeah. Well, the climactic shootouts in Mann's movies, like, never feel like a cool, badass action
It's not
scene.
the cool Leone like postmodern like I'm just gonna shoot you once and you fall over type thing.
Yeah, no, like when, like at the like in at the end of like Man of the West, like when they're like on the each side. Well, they also do that in this movie where it's like it's the
Oh, like they're firing
floorboard and
underneath the yeah.
the porch, and like they're just crawling around, and they're like and they're like kind of like flailing while they shoot at each other, and like it's not like they're doing cool moves. It's just, oh, we both happen to catch each other. Oh, we're gonna try and fire. Oh, one of us got hit first. Like, or like in Man of the West, there's a similar yeah, it happens both these movies. Or at the end of that movie, when he comes back, and when he kills like Lee J. Cobb's character, it's not like a cool showdown. Cobb is just drunk and raving because he's crazy, and Gary Cooper basically just puts him down like a dog, you
Exactly. There's
know?
there's no epic quality to it. It's done in a very yeah, just almost like there's pity in it, right? There's just let's just get this over with. And that's a great attitude I think for a filmmaker to have when it comes to film violence. It's visceral. It's not super played up. I mean, I love stylish stuff as much as anyone, but there is something to be said for the blunt effectiveness. Like here, when he just decks him with the gun, you're like, holy shit, like it's not played up. It's just fucking brutal. And yeah, this generation of filmmakers, I think, uh, Nick Ray, Anthony Mann, Robert Aldrich, the way they portray violence, it's different. It's way different than the generation before them. Like I just watched a couple weeks ago Robert Aldrich's Attack, which is one of his
Yes,
war films.
good
And
movie.
man, just it's brutal, it's really just dark. There's nothing it's there's nothing slick. It's just such a yeah, like with man, there's a grittiness, there's an anguish, there's a petulance to it. It just shows people, the violence affects their moral character, it affects their physical character, and they aren't left innocent at all by it. It just, these characters, even at the end, if they get their happy ending, they're still, they're never going to be the same. And I think, a lot of that, you compare that to, someone like Ford, it is different. And then it also looks forward to like Peckinpah and Eastwood. There's this very much this history where they move forward and they portray this more this idea of because I think Eastwood, like what he does, he takes that pain and anguish part, and then he reconciles it with the more like Fortean mythic storytelling, uh, this idea of like archetypes. He tries to square that circle, and I think he does a great job at that. And so you have like these two different traditions that end up meeting up, and people like like Eastwood and Costner and etc.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, that's an interesting way of like reconciling that dialectic. Because like on the other end of that spectrum, with the whole like the change like the changing norms in westerns where violence starts being taken more seriously and it changes people and they're never the same that reaches its apoplex in the Wild Bunch where death is sought as like the ultimate cleansing of like all of the demons that ironically you have because of the like you've committed so much violence that the only way that you can cleanse yourself is
The
if you
only way out
seek
is
it out
through.
like spectacularly and just accept your own explosive end.
Exactly. There's
Uh
a catharsis in that.
oh yeah, this is I love this when that the way the gun is foregrounded and just slightly
Yeah.
out of
But
focus
but I love
until
this too, where like we watch him go back. There's real weight to these images. When he puts on the gun, it means something. Especially too, because it's like his belt. It's on his one side where he's got his bad arm, right? So there's only so much he can do. What I also like too is like in the earlier scene, in a lot of westerns, it's just people shooting away at each other, blah blah blah, whatever. In Anthony Mann's movies, there's almost like a tactical aspect. Like in Bend of the River, at the beginning, the characters are like crawling around. They're doing like a Metal
yeah,
Gear Solid sequence where
yeah,
they're
when they're
just they're like
knifing
taking out
people.
people in the dark, and it's like fucking it's different. You don't see that in a John Ford movie. You don't see that in a Howard Hawks movie. There's no those characters wouldn't stoop themselves to crawling in the dirt like that, right? But in Anthony Mann, he's like, nah, man, this is a battlefield.
No, yeah, it's all about efficiency. It's not about honor. It's just about hurting as much without getting hurt.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
survival.
but yeah, I think of like how like I think the big thing for me when you talk about the violence is that scene in Man from Laramie where I think that they're punishing Jimmy Stewart, so they hold him down like while his hand gets shot,
Oh
and
my
like
God, yeah, I've never forgotten it.
the build up to that scene, like they keep cutting to his face as he's like anticipating like the shot, and then I think finally when he does get shot, I think it cuts to his face and he's almost on the verge of tears, and it's almost like it's not even necessarily because of like the physical pain, but just because of the whole like just the whole ritual of the inflicting it on him that like really just fucks him up like emotionally. I really love this guy, by the way. This black hat dude with the brown leather
Yeah, he's
uh
dual wielding.
jacket. Yeah, he's really good at being like that's kind of a Lee Van Cleef type of vibe.
Yeah,
Very good at
definitely.
being a shithead.
Oh, was Lee Van Cleef ever in an Anthony Mann movie?
Oh yeah, that is a good question. I'm not sure. I because I know that he was in a Bud Bodeker movie, but I don't know about Anthony Mann. Yeah, this whole thing, like you mentioned the tactics, like sending the horse like with the bell, because like that's how you know that he's in town. But and then he just comes from behind and shoots him like a badass.
See, like the back and forth quality of this too, the way it's intercut, there just is like kind of a there's something where like, these guys just get caught and all they can do is just like stand fucking look at this. And yeah, like him, the tumbling quality, like his characters move around. There's like a not quite balletic, but there's this idea of maneuvers being made. See, this is a fucked up thing too. I knew he couldn't take him. Well, why'd you send him out there then, man? Like, for what purpose? I guess just to wear him down ultimately, right? That's the idea. That's why you have henchmen, is that they're just in between you and the fucker who's trying to get you. Now this thing too, he goes around the back, tries to sneak up on him, you know. It's a classic bad guy thing.
And then, of course,
See, but you
we
look at
gotta
here, right?
have,
The geography is really emphasized. It's very clear.
yeah,
You see him through the window. Yeah, she gets shot. Fucked up.
yeah. No, we can't have the if you know if it's between the lady who represents the community and the lady who like represents cutting out and making your own. I guess Borden's got to go with we can't have that. We can't have the right choice has got to be the staying and helping out. So, and yeah, love can get you killed. Love can that's the danger too of trying to look out for people other than your own. I mean, Jimmy
Yeah,
Stewart
well,
in
that's the thing, is
Cynical.
that it's almost like she makes her choice too late, because earlier in the film she's so rootless, you know, she's just, she's kind of a jerk. And so, yeah, like she makes her decision and it's too late. Yeah, this whole thing shooting underneath the porch. Yeah, this is a motif that he likes, Man of the West. It's cool because, like, again, you look at it, it's like not very heroic. It's just, and like this is the end too, You think about it. If it wasn't for these villagers coming to help him, he would have been shot up by all these bad guys in the house.
It's kind of melancholic and bittersweet because they all join together and they all overthrow this sort of dictator, but as the arc of history goes on, uh, the people have still not taken over permanently in the long run. So I guess this was just things evened out eventually, even if they were able to stand up to authority for a little bit. But some of these westerns do present that sort of dream of people coming together, and
Yeah,
even
the
if
the communal aspect.
it didn't work then, you can try and have it inspire you to see how you can make it work now. Is the way that
That's right.
I like to look
Oh, and
at
I
it.
love this. We end on the bell. It's so good.
Yeah.
See, look, this is a very like unconventional thing for a man. This like wooziness. It's cute. Oh, great,
I like that
great
ending
film.
'cause, I guess it's because the whole point of it was he wanted to know when he would come home, and I guess pushing in on the bells, like, well, he's finally going to be home now. He won't be
That's
wandering
right.
around anymore. All right, yeah, good movie. Love Anthony
That was
Mann.
The Far Country. Thank you all for listening.